All right, so we started on our study of the seven churches, and last week we looked at the church of Ephesus. But of course, as always, I like to do a quick review of some of the main points before we move on. Dear Sister Jess, good to see you. I like to do a quick review of some of the main points so that we can have continuity each time we come together. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, but I want to begin, as I said, with a quick review of where we are going and the direction we are taking. Just a reminder that, of course, this is our Bible study section. And in our Bible study, we're more open to meaningful interruptions. And by that I mean interruptions where you want to ask a question for clarity, or there's an important point you want to make. Fine. I would ask that you don't just interrupt to tell a story or something like that. But certainly, I want to make sure that we have understanding of what we're doing. So questions for clarification are welcome. I know that we are kind of exploring. In a sense, we are feeling our way. So maybe we can take wrong turns at times. So if anybody has any suggestion that can be helpful, any correction that you think should be made, all of that is welcome. All right, just bear that in mind. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And yeah, we'll remind ourselves that we were looking at the seven churches, and the suggestion that I made is that these seven churches in Revelation represent seven conditions which arose historically in the Christian church. Seven significant conditions which marked different aspects of the Christian church. Each one arose at a different time. They arose one behind the other. But the difference in what we are saying is that these conditions did not arise and come to an end, but that these conditions arose and each one has continued in the Christian church over the ages. From the time they started, they continue right down to the end of time. So that today in Christendom, in the Christian church today, these seven conditions all coexist. Of course, there was the idea that when you come to the end of time, everything is going to condense into one condition, one church, the remnant. I don't know, maybe you will still have elements of all those conditions even in the remnant, in the 144,000. Maybe as we discuss further, we can see whether that is true or not. But anyway, these are the seven conditions that I suggested. Number one, the church of Ephesus, and of course there were seven churches: Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodicea. Seven churches in Asia that Jesus mentioned by name, and these messages were to go to those seven churches. But what we have concluded is that in the book of Revelation, literal places, literal names, literal events are used to represent greater places, greater entities, greater in volume, in size, in scope. So when you talk about the Jews or Israel, you're not talking about the little nation down there in the Middle East or the flesh and blood descendants of Abraham. We're talking about the great Christian body that is made up of people who are bound together by the blood of Jesus Christ. These are the true Israel. So that's what we mean. When you talk about Babylon, we're not talking about a place down there in Iran or Iraq. We're talking about a great spiritual entity that envelops the whole planet. So when you talk about Ephesus, we're not talking about that church down there in Asia Minor. We're talking about some greater concept of the church which exists in a Christian environment. So the first of these was Ephesus. And of course, we believe that Ephesus started out or Ephesus represents in the first instance the early Christian church, the first stage of the Christian church, which was the apostolic era. So it started around about the time that the day of Pentecost, from about then right down to about AD 100. And what I suggested is that this represents Christianity in a hostile religious environment, because this was the mark of that apostolic church. I don't know if we ever had another time when the Christian church has been in that condition, when Christianity as a whole was persecuted by, was completely surrounded by a hostile religious environment. That was the only time, as far as I know. I know Christians in different places have been under that kind of system, but not the Christian church as a whole body. So that's the mark that stands out of that age. They were in a hostile religious environment. Then we commented on Smyrna, that Smyrna represents Christianity in a hostile political environment. And that's what we are going to look at today. But let's just remind ourselves quickly of the others. Pergamos represents Christianity in the Orthodox church environment. We'll come to that. Thyatira represents Christianity in the Roman Church, Roman Catholic Church environment. Sardis represents Christianity in the Protestant environment. Philadelphia represents Christianity in the environment of the Little Book movement. And finally, Laodicea represents Christianity in a state of apostasy from that Little Book movement. Now, as we continue to study, if any of this, if we have to review or revisit any of these and maybe make adjustments, we will. Because as you all know, in a sense, we are feeling our way. We are not putting anything in stone, but we are trying to see if we can find the best explanation based on the information we have available. All right? This is not dogma where somebody comes and says, this is it and this is what you believe. No, we're all exploring together. So if there's something that seems to make more sense, absolutely. Let's hear it and let's explore it together. But thus far, this is what I'm understanding. All right, so let's continue with the message to Smyrna. And we will read it from Revelation chapter 2. I'll read through, then we will go through our comments. So it's from verse 8 on to verse 11. It says, "And unto the angel of the church in Smyrna write." And of course, just a reminder, it's addressed, all of them is addressed to the angel of the church. And we understand that the word angel in this context means the messenger. We would say the ministry. Those who are the teachers, those who are the pastors, the evangelists in this age of the church. The message is addressed to them. Everything that is in these messages is of critical meaning. Jesus is trying to say something. So, it's very necessary that we examine every phrase, every word, if possible, as carefully as we can. Now it says, "Unto the angel of the church in Smyrna, write." First of all, he gives you his identity. "These things saith the first and the last, which was dead and is alive." I made the point last week. I'm going to make it again. Every message begins with a description that comes from Revelation chapter 1. Well, not everyone, but most of them. There's always a description pointing to some attribute of Jesus. When we looked at Ephesus, it said he was the one who was holding the 7 stars in his right hand and who was walking in the midst of the 7 candlesticks. And these descriptions have something to do with the experience of the church. So when you come down to Smyrna, notice what Jesus says about himself. He is the first and the last. This has something to do with the experience of Smyrna. He was the one who was dead and is alive. This has something to do with the experience of Smyrna. That's why he's telling them that. And then he says, I know thy works, thy tribulation, and thy poverty, but thou art rich. I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison, that you may be tried, and you shall have tribulation 10 days. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a crown of life. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. Every one of the messages ends with this statement. He who has an ear, let him hear. Now you know that this was a phrase that Jesus used all the time in his preaching. He that hath ears to hear, let him hear. So he's continuing to use the same phrase in his last message. He's continuing to use the same phrase. And what it really means is, you know that in, well, I don't know if you have it everywhere, but in Jamaica, they have a phrase where they say a child have hard ears. Is that something universal? You ever heard that before, Brother Kip? A child has hard ears.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess so.
Okay. So it's not a uniquely Jamaican phrase. But they say, why your ears so hard? Why your ears so hard? That's a phrase they use. And they have a proverb that says, hard ears pickney, dead as sun hot. If your ears are hard, you're going to die in the hot sun. That's what it really means. So anyway, but Jesus was kind of saying something like this. When he says, he that hath ears to hear, everybody has ears to hear. But he's emphasizing that there are some who have ears and they don't seem capable of hearing. In other words, they receive information, but it doesn't stick or it doesn't affect the person. To have ears to hear means that you're capable of receiving information and treating it in such a way that it makes a change in your life. That's what he's emphasizing. So, of course, he's using physical ears as the focus of his message. But we understand what he's saying. Look, if you are capable of understand and respond. That's what he's saying. Yes, Brother Kip.
I was just going to say, like the other night when I was saying that Jesus was telling them people, you're not listening. Listen. I am the
Exactly.
Son of God. Listen to what I am saying.
Absolutely. So, and then he says it in all his messages. I think you remember he said it last week at Ephesus. Um, he that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit said unto the churches. He comes back and says it again to Smyrna, and he says it in all his messages. So, at the end of each message, there's an appeal for people to listen, pay attention, and respond to what he's saying in these messages. And, I have to say that for myself, I think I need to take that more seriously. Probably the message I've paid the most attention to was Laodicea. And I hope I've heard, I hope I've heard the Laodicean message. But clearly there is some message for all of us in all the there's something for all of us in all of the messages. And when Jesus says, if you have ears to hear, hear, surely we ought to treat them with a lot of respect and pay attention to what is being said. So he ends the message by saying, he that overcometh shall not be hurt of the second death. Now notice something. He starts by saying, I was dead and I am alive. He says again, be faithful unto death, and I will give you a crown of life. And he ends by saying, if you overcome, you will not be hurt of the second death. Somebody just unmute and tell me quickly what seems to be the focus of this message.
Overcome.
Life everlasting.
What did you say, Viv?
Oops, sorry.
Oh, it wasn't okay. You said life everlasting, Brother Kip?
Yes.
All right. Anybody else?
For
Why
those who
die?
overcome, the second death won't hurt you.
All right.
So
That's the
you
last message.
eternal life, period.
All right. Somebody else in the background was saying something. Huh?
Death
Just
and
said
life, being dead
death,
and being alive.
death and being alive. All right.
Question.
Brother Kip, you.
I was asking a question, brother.
Well,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, it all reminds me of God always calling them in the Old Testament. Is always saying, here's what you need to do. You do these things and you'll live. Why do you want to die?
Okay.
That was something I got from the Old Testament.
All right. Brother Dwayne.
Yes, I was asking, does it have anything to, because in my mind, the first death is, for example, here we live and we die. The second death being when Christ comes and gives reward, and that second death, is it that second death?
All right. Yeah, Sister Jess said death, and then she added life. Um, all right. I'm going to give you my take on it because most of you touched on what I'm thinking, but I'm going to verbalize it a little differently than maybe some of us. I believe the emphasis on Smyrna is the fact that they seem to be facing death. The emphasis in the Smyrna message is that it is a church, that one strong feature of Smyrna is martyrdom. Jesus mentions death to them 3 different times. Yes, the final message is they will get a crown of life. What he seems to be saying. Anyway, I'll comment on this further, but I just wanted to say that at the beginning. So let me go back to my PowerPoint here and continue in that vein. But I just want you to think about that because every message has an emphasis, and the message to the Smyrna church is a message to bring comfort to people who seem to be in an environment where death is a constant companion. So, first of all, what does Smyrna mean? Smyrna is a sweet-smelling perfume, but I understand it's bitter. I'm not sure if it tastes bitter. I don't think it smells bitter, but it's a bitter perfume. So it smells sweet. It's a sweet smelling over and over in the Bible. It comes from the word myrrh. Over and over in the Bible, especially in the book of Song of Solomon, you see where myrrh is the garment of my love. It's full of the smell of myrrh. His hands are dripping with myrrh. So myrrh is a sweet, pleasing smell. But I understand it's bitter. I don't know if it means it's bitter to the taste, probably. But anyway, so the very name itself gives the idea of something that is pleasing, but it has a bitter element in it. And I'm going to suggest to you, first of all, that it represents Christians under a godless, persecuting state. And it's a church that is characterized by martyrs or by martyrdom. The main element of Smyrna is that many of the members will die, and they are facing imminent death. So we will see how the message that Jesus gives is peculiarly suited to these people. Now, remember that we said that this started at a certain point, but it continues to the end of time. So last week we were looking at Christians being persecuted by other religious groups. And one of the primary persecuting groups that we saw is probably Islam. There are many countries where Christians are severely persecuted by radical Islam, but we also saw that Hinduism does some of that, and other religions maybe to a lesser extent. But so that is one, and this represented the church in the first stages, because even though we think of Rome as a persecuting power, Rome was not the chief persecutor in the early years of Christianity. It was the Jewish religion. It was Judaism and the Jews who were the great persecutors of Christians. Sometimes they met upon isolated persecution. They would stone Paul in certain places. Yes, that is true. But the main tyrant that was constantly in their back was the Jews. And if you read the writings of Paul, you will find that he is more concerned about the Jews than he is about the pagans. He said, beware of the concision. And he even refers to them as dogs at one point, right? So he sees them as the greatest threat to Christianity. And of course, they stoned Stephen to death. Herod was the leader of the Jewish nation. He beheaded James. He arrested Peter. And the persecution that broke out was mostly Jews against them. It was probably years later, it was many years later, after the time that Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans and the Jewish nation was no longer a factor, that the great persecutions by the Roman state. Now the Roman government took upon themselves to persecute Christianity, because after a while they came to the conclusion that the Christian religion was becoming a threat to Rome. And of course, when you think that anything becomes a threat to the state will take action against it. And so Rome became the great persecutor of Christians. So you had the Emperor Nero, who was one of the early devils. You know, we understand his viciousness against Christians got to the place where he would dip them in tar and use them to light his garden at night, or he did that on one occasion. So there was great persecution which lasted with great intensity for over 300 years. And this is the period in which we place the Smyrna church. And it's in this context now that we are going to be looking at the statements of Jesus. Now, the other thing about the Smyrna congregation is that, as we said, it started at that time. Let's say about AD 100, more or less. These dates are not set in stone; they are generalized time periods, right? But what we see is that this condition has never stopped. Christians from the time of Rome until the present day are still being persecuted, not just by other religious groups, but by political states. And I'm going to give you examples of this. State persecution today. So, probably the most well-known and the most draconian example of this is North Korea. You can read with me on the screen. It says it remains a top country for persecution, where owning a Bible or practicing Christianity can lead to execution. Just to own a Bible, or just for it to be known that you're a Christian, can lead to you being executed or being put in labor camps where you work until you die. So I don't think there's anywhere else in the world that is quite as draconian as that. So if we think it was bad in the days of Nero, in this place, North Korea, it's probably just as bad. So owning a Bible, that's huge, because in most countries, even where there's a lot of persecution, Islamic countries, they will leave you alone if you don't try to share your faith. But in this country, just if it is known that you're a Christian. So they have made atheism a state policy that if you want to exist in that country, you need to be an atheist. And surely for a Christian, it's a frightening condition if you live in a country like that. So when we talk about persecution and we look to the future, we are really very, very privileged. And not all Christianity is equal in that regard. So, sometimes we look at some of the statements in the Bible and we have to take things like this into consideration. Some people are suffering great tribulation right now. Sister Esther, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I think China is pretty bad too because of the way they're harvesting organs out of live people, and some of the organs that they harvest will just actually kill the people. But it's pretty bad over there to be a Christian.
Right, I'm going to mention China in the list as well. But I suppose if they're harvesting organs, it's not just because you're a Christian. Maybe it's people in general. So I want to focus peculiarly on persecution just because you're a Christian.
Falun Gong, I understand, is a Christian group, and they're the ones that are targeted.
Okay.
I'm sure I'm saying that right, but
all right. Yes, I don't have knowledge of it, but I am taking it. I'm accepting it. Your word says. All right. So the next on the list, and I'm going here from information I was able to gather from the internet. It says Eritrea. Now Eritrea, I think, is just next to Ethiopia. It used to be a part of Ethiopia, but it broke away. It is known as the North Korea of Africa. The government restricts worship to approved denominations. I want you to bear that in mind. Denominations that are approved by the government. With hundreds of Christians from non-traditional groups imprisoned, often in brutal conditions. Now, that's very interesting because in these countries you kind of get an encapsulated experience of what we expect to come upon the whole world. It's like God uses these small situations to teach us some lessons if we are willing to learn. Because notice that there are Christians who are allowed to survive in this particular country, and I know it's true in many countries, but what are the conditions? You have to be approved by the state, and in other words, the state basically determines what you believe and what you preach. I know that when the Soviet Union existed and godless communism prevailed in those Eastern European countries, there would be government agents in the church. They would select the leaders, probably even the pastors, and there would be government agents sitting in the churches while you were having worship service so that they could approve what you were preaching. The only place where genuine Christianity could survive was the underground churches. People met in their homes illegally in secret places where if you were discovered, you would be imprisoned, possibly executed. And this is happening in places like Eritrea, as we are seeing. And this is what we expect to happen when the mark of the beast envelops the entire world. There will be churches that survive. There will be churches that continue to exist and to flourish because they will be approved by the government. And I believe that those will be the established denominations, the little sects and what they would call offshoot groups. Definitely groups like this will be existing only underground. So we keep talking about what will happen, but it's just beneficial to know that it is already happening in certain places in the world. Then you have India, where, India is a mixed country, as you know. We have some of our brethren who are from India. Brother Anil, he is not suffering persecution where he is. I think it's the same with Sister Regina. but there are some places where it's not safe. Religious nationalism is a major driver. So you have what is religious nationalism? It's the idea that India should have its own religion, and that the Indian religion should not be allowed to be replaced by what they would call foreign religions. So the religion of Hinduism is a major driver. And so there are Hindu extremists, like you have Islamic extremists, and they target Christian properties and schools and churches. And as a part of this, there are several states where you have anti-conversion laws, which means if you're a Christian, stay in your corner and don't try to convert people. There are laws against conversion, which are used to harass and arrest Christians. And there's a certain brother, Naik, I think some of us know about him, who was in prison for a few months because they said he was trying to convert people in some place up near the Tibetan border. So that exists in India. Now, do I have China? I should have China. I hope I have China on the list, because China is certainly a major promoter of this kind of thing. Pakistan. Christians face severe discrimination and risk of violence. Now Pakistan is partially because it's a very strongly Islamic country, but the result is that the religion affects the laws of the state. That's why I put this under state persecution. So Christians face severe discrimination. There are certain privileges you don't have if you're a Christian. There's risk of violence. Mobs will carry out violence, and the government itself. This violence is often fueled. It is strengthened by blasphemy laws. So there are laws against blasphemy, which if you as a Christian are teaching Christianity, for example, if you were to say that Jesus is the only way of salvation, that might be regarded as blasphemy. Or if you were to say that it took the death of Jesus to save you, that his death atones for your sin. I don't know what exactly, but that's what blasphemy laws mean. It means that you make a statement that is considered contrary to the religion of the state, supported by the state, and so it's blasphemy. And these are frequently used to falsely accuse these Christians and to trigger mob attacks. And I can tell you from my experience that a mob attack is the worst thing. I think that when the mark of the beast comes, the thing we will be most in danger of is mob attacks. It was a mob attack that killed Stephen. At least when they got Jesus, they carried him before the political leader, and he had a trial. It was a kangaroo court, but at least he got some kind of trial. But when a mob gets you, you don't have any chance. You know, I saw that happen to somebody in Jamaica. I tried to do something to stop it, and look, they would have killed me. They would have killed me if I had tried to intervene. All I could do was make an appeal until they killed the person. But anyway, Pakistan. Oh yes, I have China on the list. Okay, Myanmar. Myanmar is a little country not too far from China. And I guess like me, maybe most people don't know much about Myanmar, but it's a country apparently that is dominated by Buddhism. And it says the military regime and Buddhist nationalist groups target Christians, especially in areas. When they say ethnic minority, it means areas where you have people from other nationalities. Like if you're not a native from Myanmar, you come from another country, and you're living there, and you have a different religion, you're a minority, an ethnic minority. And then if you happen to be a Christian, then you become a more easy target. All right, China. The state enforces strict controls And of course, China is the #1 country when it comes to surveillance. They have mastered the art of keeping track of citizens. It says the church enforces strict controls, including surveillance. They are watching everything, very effective at it, better than the United States. And it says the sinicization of religion. And of course, sinicization means making everything Chinese. So for example, I suppose if you're teaching Christianity, you have to give Chinese names. I'm just assuming. I'm giving an example. Or maybe you have to wear Chinese clothing that is considered religious garb, maybe instead of the Western garb of the jacket and tie. I'm giving examples that I don't know, but I'm just giving an example of what sinicization means. It means that you have to put your religion in the context of China. And it says it forces churches to align with communist theology. So this sounds a lot like what we have in Korea, as Sister Esther was pointing out. So again, these are conditions which give us an idea of what to expect when the mark of the beast comes. And we should be praying for our brethren who live under these conditions, brothers and sisters. Iran. Well, Iran is a subject of a lot of public attention now, and it's two different things with what is going on now, because at the moment, they are being attacked by the United States and Israel in what many people believe is a very surprising and very unreasonable situation. But that's different from what we are looking at here now. Because here it says that the government suppresses Christians, especially those who convert from Islam, who face imprisonment and detention for participating in underground churches. I don't think there's much of that going on right now. They have other issues that certainly they are worried about right now. But that has been the condition in Iran until recently. So let us spend some time now looking at the details of the message. And what I'm going to do is simply list what Jesus says and see if we can comment on each one. So, first of all, is sweet-smelling myrrh, and I did comment on that already. It means that it is something that is, myrrh is the basis of perfume. Now, I don't know if you will recall that when God was telling Moses to make the ointment, it was an ointment that was used to anoint the priest, and it was used to anoint the tabernacle. And God gave Moses strict instructions how to make this ointment. It was supposed to be a sweet-smelling ointment. And one of the ingredients was myrrh. The phrase that comes up several times in the Old Testament was that it was a sweet savor unto God, a sweet smell. It's used sometimes with reference to the sacrifices. And it says that when the sacrifice was offered, for example, when Noah offered a sacrifice after the flood, it says that the smell rose up before God as a sweet-smelling savor. And if you don't understand what is being said, you might think that God loves the smell of burning flesh. But of course, the Bible many times uses literal, physical things to teach us spiritual truth. And that whole statement, oh my goodness, I wish people could understand how the Bible works. That whole statement, Noah burns an animal, and the smell comes to God, and God smells a sweet smell. And it smells so good that God says, I won't do this anymore. Glory. Unpleasant ideas, images. And the message behind it is so beautiful. So when he talks about God smelling, God doesn't smell. But he's using human experience to speak of something far greater in God's experience, because we smell things, it pleases the nose, and you feel nice, right? But with God, it's not the smell, it's the effect of what is happening that is impacting God and pleasing to God. So what is happening? Noah gets an animal and sacrifices the animal. This animal has nothing to do with how God is feeling. This animal represents the true Lamb of God, Jesus Christ. So God is not seeing Noah's animal. God is seeing faith in his son who dies. And so when his son dies and is burned in the fire of affliction, the smell of it or the consequence of it is that it pleases God. Does it please God in the sense that he feels nice about the death of his son? No. It pleases God in the sense that God becomes the awareness of what the death of Jesus means comes to God, reaches to the inner part of God, and makes God favorable towards humanity. That God says, I'm not going to destroy them by a flood anymore. So I know all of you understand this, but I just wanted to go through step by step to remind us of how you can read something in the Bible that seems to be so clearly talking about something human and physical and limited and graphic. And if you are not a spiritual person, you say God loves the smell of burning flesh. And this is an aspect of the scriptures that I believe it's very beneficial if we explore it more and understand it better. So, and all of you understand, but I'm just going there because I have an opportunity to talk about that. So the sweet smelling Smyrna. So what God is saying about Smyrna, remember that a name signifies a character, and God has chosen this church because of its name, because he wants to use it as a lesson. So the name of Smyrna, whatever there is about Smyrna, the experience of Smyrna, a name represents an experience, a character. The experience or the character of Smyrna is a sweet smell to God. It invokes good feelings. It makes God favorable towards Smyrna, the character of Smyrna. So that is important because we're going to look at the character of Smyrna or the experience of Smyrna. So the next thing he says that he is the first and the last. Why is it significant for Jesus to say, I'm the first and the last? Well, I think what it is saying is that Jesus encompasses everything. So, you know, I had occasion to talk with a person recently. And, you know, she's going through a hard time. But as I listened to her, I didn't even know what to say to encourage her, apart from to pray for her, which is what she wanted anyway. But, you know, she talked about her life from she was a little girl and how lonely she has been all her life and how nobody ever liked her. And it brings her to the place where at the moment she's thinking of taking her own life. And I'm listening and I want to find the right words to say. And I don't even know what to say because she's a Christian. But you know, the weight of your experience, to live with it every day, it weighs you down. And as I was reading this statement from Jesus, it took on a little bit more meaning of what he's saying. He said, I'm the first and the last. It means it doesn't matter where you started. It doesn't matter where you think you are ending. You are encompassed in between. I have you in my hands. My love does not leave you. Never for a moment was it that I was not there. I love you. I'm the first and the last. You can never go anywhere where you can escape my love and my watchful eye. When everybody else forsakes you and everybody else has nothing to do with you, I am there. I was there at the beginning. I will be there at the end. I'm the first and the last. This is his identification to a church that is going to go through terrible times. You see what I'm saying? They are to go through terrible times, and they are to suffer awful things. And so it's important that they understand that there's no place they can go in their suffering that he was not there. He's always there. First and the last. I think that's what he's trying to say, why he makes that statement. He encompasses everything. And then he says, I was dead, but now I am alive. Like you guys were saying, like those who answered, if you are going to die, who do you want in charge of your life? Somebody who has been there, done that, and he's back. Been there, done that, and I'm back. I am dead, and now I'm alive. So if you're going to be facing death, that's the kind of guy you want in your corner. Because, you know, it reinforces the idea. This is something that was very pleasurable to me when I understood it. When Jesus said, I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. For much of my life, I thought he was saying, death, my church is not going to die. My church is not going to die out. Hell can't kill you. But later, in studying the book of Revelation more carefully, I realized that's not what he's saying. Jesus' answer to death is not to stop you from dying. His answer is far more beautiful. He says, okay, you're faced by that. Okay, don't worry. I'm not going to stop you from dying. You're going to experience it. What is the answer? I am he that was dead, and I am alive forevermore, and I have the keys of death and of hell. Wow. That's why the gates of hell cannot prevail against the church, because Jesus has the key of hell. Even when I talk about it, man, my heart is just rejoicing. I love the amazing ways of God and his Son. In the world, you'd think that is it. That is the end of it. It's the end of the road. It's the end of the story. Jesus is saying, I was dead and I'm alive. That's what you want to hear if you are in Smyrna. Because Smyrna is a place where death is your constant companion. You can laugh it off because Jesus is the first and the last. And he is the one who was dead, but is alive. When you get into the depths of it, it's really a beautiful message for those who are in that Smyrna condition. He's the conqueror of death. That's what he's trying to say. So don't be afraid to die. He says, I know your works and your tribulation. So he says he knows you are going to suffer tribulation. And he knows your works. He knows the things you have been doing in spite of the situation in which you live. And what he's saying is that these Christians are not alone. His eye is on them. Brother Matt, I don't know if you want to say something, but you are unmuted. All right. So I want to put this in context. Let us say, for example, you are in North Korea, or Myanmar, or China, where to be labeled as a Christian in North Korea, it can get you executed or put you in jail. You want to know that the person who sent me here, who put me here, he knows what you're going through. He knows what you are doing to promote his name. He knows the things you are suffering. And he is the one who has conquered it. This message to these Christians who are in these conditions should be very encouraging. And that's why he says, he that hath ears to hear, let him hear. If you are in this kind of situation and you read this message, know that Jesus is speaking to you personally. That is why he put these messages in Revelation. He wants to get to you personally, because it's one thing to hear a message from the Bible, and it's another thing to personalize it, right? I read in the Bible, I read Jesus saying, I will manifest myself to you. Yeah, it's a verse in the Bible. I will manifest myself. One day, I feel a need. I wish I could see him more. I wish I could experience him more. And so I go back and look at the verse, and the verse says, if a man love me, he will keep my word. And now I'm hearing, now I'm listening. Now I want to get the answer. I want to find out, how can I get him to come and live in my house, that everywhere I turn, I'm aware of him. You know, there is a thing about being with the Lord, and there's a thing about being aware of the presence of the Lord. I can be acutely aware of the difference because I've mentioned to you the experience you have. You're talking, you're praying to the roof, you're praying to the wall, you're kneeling down and your prayer is going into the bed. And one day you think, I want more than this. And so you get yourself in a very dark room and you put a chair there and you say, Lord Jesus, please sit in this chair. You know you're being childish, you know you're being infantile in your approach, but somehow it helps you. And you start focusing your attention on that chair. I've been in that condition at times where I was afraid to open my eyes because I felt his presence so close. I felt him in the room. I was afraid to open my eyes. And I'm using this as an example to say that you can read the Bible and you read the words and yeah, there are vague encouragement, but there comes a time when you come to grips with them and you get what they're saying. And I'm saying that if you're a Christian living under the Smyrna condition, where you are suffering this great state persecution and your life is in jeopardy, Jesus is speaking to you in this message. That's the point. That's why he put this message in the Bible. Because to us in Laodicea, tell me the truth. Can you really empathize with this? Only in a second-hand way. You can think of these people who when they step out of their door in the morning, their lives can be in jeopardy. Somebody say, he's a Christian, and you can die for it. This message cannot resonate with us at this point in time, but it is there for certain Christians because there are people who live in the Smyrna condition right now. And for them, I would love to read this message if I were one of them, where he says, I know your works. I understand your situation. And look, I was dead and I am alive. Yeah, that's what I would want to hear. That's what I would want to hear. And Jesus has put it there exactly because there's for these Christians, because there's a message for all the conditions that exist in Christendom. He goes on to say, you're poor, but you are rich. Who thinks you are poor? The state thinks you are poor. The secular society thinks you are poor. You don't have any of this world's goods. You're living like a pauper. But whose opinion whose approval are you looking for? Whose opinion do you value? He says, you are poor, but in my eyes, I know you are rich. That's what you want. His perspective is what really matters. Now he says, I know the what does he say? He says exactly, I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and they are not, but they are the synagogue of Satan. Now, I would like somebody to answer. In the context of what we have been looking at, who do you think are these fake Jews? Based on our discussion this far, who do you think are these fake Jews? Any ideas, anybody?
The nominal Christian.
Those who are accepted by the state. Yes, Sister Elizabeth, that's what I had in mind. The churches that are approved by the state. Remember the church, the state in most of these countries, well, except North Korea and maybe Myanmar, but in most of these countries, they allow Christianity to function in state-approved congregations. These are the people who claim to be Christians, but they're really adulterers. They claim to be Jews, but they're really fake Christians. So Jesus says they're actually the synagogue of Satan. They're the congregation of Satan. So I really believe that this is the group that Jesus is speaking about, those who are the approved Christianity, approved by these persecutors, while the true people of God, the true Jews, are the ones who are hated by the state and the society. Yeah, they are the state-run churches. He says the devil will imprison some. And it's interesting that he says it's the devil who will do it. I know that, why does he say the devil? And then in some of the other messages, he doesn't identify the devil himself. But I could suggest a little reason. I think it's one of the things you could look at is that the seat of Satan. What is the seat of Satan? And if you look at the book of Revelation, it says that Satan gave to the beast his seat and great authority. So where is the seat of Satan if he gives it to the beast? The seat of Satan is the state power. The controlling governments in the world today are given the seat of Satan. Jesus does not control the governments of the world. He does not. I don't know if you can look at any country in the world and say that this country is run by a Christian government. And don't tell me America, please. There is no country in the world that is run in a Christian way. And as a matter of fact, by law, most countries are forbidden from bringing Christianity in a dominant way into the state. Well, I mean, the Vatican, I suppose, would claim that it's a Christian state. The Vatican would make that claim, but I mean, they are probably the only ones who might believe that. So, the seat of Satan, as you suggest, give me just a second. The seat of Satan I'm suggesting would be the state, the control of the state. So, Jesus says the devil will put you in prison because it is those who are under his control who are carrying out this, or it's a state which represents his seat, which is carrying out this persecution. Go ahead, Sister Jess.
That actually makes a lot of sense with the church being the state approved, or the Jews being the state approved religion. Because it says it's the synagogue of Satan, and you're saying that the seat of Satan is the state. And so the synagogue of Satan would be the church approved religion. So that ties in perfectly. Makes your point.
I didn't see the connection, so thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. That's a further strengthening of the point. So I hope everybody understood that. So if Satan's seat is a state, and then you have a church that is approved by the state and is basically run by the state, then of course it makes sense that that is the synagogue or the church of Satan. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. So the devil will imprison some through his agent, the state. So again, I identify that prison indicates state persecution. Just the fact that you have the word prison is what I mean, because churches, religious persecution does not put you in prison. Religious persecution stones you to death, or kills you with a mob, or burns down your church. But if you talk about prison, you're talking about the state. It is the state that imprisons people. So this is another indicator that Smyrna represents Christians under state persecution.
Brother David,
So
who you
as
say that Jews are?
come again,
Who you say that the group that said that they are Jews and are not? Who you say they are?
you're just joining us, right?
No. I just didn't get that part.
What? I spent so long making that point, and you and Sister Jess joining, and you missed it.
No, I heard what Sister just said, but I'm not quite clear on who you said that the Jews, who said they are or not. But you asked the question, but I didn't get the answer.
All right. So what we are suggesting is that there are two groups of Christians in these countries where there is state persecution. There are the underground Christians, the genuine Christians, and there are the state-run churches. When I was reading about persecution in, where was it? It mentioned this in was it Ethiopia or Eritrea? Yeah, it mentioned that there are the churches that are approved by the state don't suffer the same persecution, but those who are not approved by the state, they suffer the persecution. So I was suggesting that these are the synagogue of Satan. They say they are Jews, but they are liars, because they're actually in bed with the state. That's how they survive. So these, I was saying, is a synagogue of Satan.
Oh
And
yeah, I
then,
got the part about synagogue of Satan. I didn't get it. I didn't make the connection within those.
right. So then I went on to say that the seat of Satan is a state. And I demonstrated it by saying that it says in Revelation
You're
13 that,
muted.
no, I'm not. You're having a problem, Sister Elizabeth. So I made the point that it says in Revelation that the dragon gave the beast his power and his seat. And what he did was he gave the beast the pinnacle of political power. Following so far?
Yes, I follow that far.
Right. So political power is invested in the state. So the seat of Satan is the state. The seat of Satan's power is always the state, even although he gives it in maximum degree to the beast. So what I'm saying is that what Sister Jess was saying is that since the state is the mother of these state-run churches, it authorizes them, supports them, determines how they are run, then they are in a way actually the church of the state or the synagogue of Satan. Satan's babies, because it comes through his child, the state. Can you make the connection?
Yeah, I'm making the connection now. So
All
in
right.
the other message to the other churches where Jesus mentioned other for the people who say they're Jews and are not, are they coming under the same kind of classification? That's what I'm trying to get.
Okay. Well, we haven't come to the other one yet. So when we come to the other one, I would like to examine it individually because we might find it's the same, or we might find some
Okay.
other nuance. Yes.
That's the part of it I didn't connect with. All right, okay.
Okay. Brother, keep your hands up.
Yeah, but I think I'll wait until you get to the Protestants because
Okay.
like in the U.S. they pay taxes for their churches and all that stuff. So
All right. We'll come to Sardis. All right. So the next thing he says that they will be tried, and of course the most terrible way, but probably the most effective way of trying Christians is putting them through fire. So very difficult trials will be experienced. This is the first time that I'm going through this message of Smyrna. I've been through Revelation so many times. It's the first time I'm going through, and all of these details seem to fit so perfectly. I guess because I'm looking at it a little differently this time, but everything seems to fit perfectly, and I'm thinking that absolutely this message was put here by Jesus for Christians in this exact condition that we are discussing here. Now he says they would experience 10 days of tribulation. Now, this 10 days is a bit of a challenge. And I know that they say that, if you look this up on the internet, they will tell you that the literal church of Smyrna suffered some kind of persecution from the Romans, and it was for a few days. It wasn't 10 days. If you look at it, those who have a historical point of view, like the Adventists, they say that there were 10 years, a day for a year, and they say there were 10 years when the Christians in that period suffered intense persecution. But I looked in a different direction, and I was trying to discover whether the number 10 has any other kind of significance, because if it had said they suffer 7 days persecution, all of us would know exactly what it means. So this number 10 comes up very often in the book of Revelation as well. And I am wondering if it means sometimes not literal 10, but there's some other meaning. I was searching around and I got some suggestions, but after looking at all the different ideas, there's one that seems to make some sense to me, and it is this, that the number 10 signifies great intensity. Now, I don't know. I'm not saying it is so, because I would want to apply it to other situations. Great intensity or not great intensity so much as the main focus. All right, you have 100 things in front of you, and you fixate on one, and this one becomes the center of your focus, and so that one becomes number 10. You label that one number 10, not because it is 10th in the line or because there are 10 of them, but because 10 signifies the place of focus. I hope I'm not being too vague. I know some of you might follow me and some of you might not, so let me repeat what I'm saying. So I'm leaning in the direction that the number 10, if it's not, when it doesn't mean something literal, sometimes it does. Clearly, when you look at the 10 horns on the head of the beast in Daniel 7, it means literal 10. 3 are plucked up, leaving 7. It means literal 10. So I'm not saying it is always so, but there are some times when it is not very clear, like this 10 days here. And I think the 10, what the 10 means now, what the 10 is intended to do is to give us a spiritual, if I can use the word, a spiritual meaning. And the spiritual meaning is that this, whatever the 10 is pointing to, is the focus, what we should put our attention to. So what is the focus? You will suffer 10 days of tribulation. So what is the emphasis of Smyrna? The emphasis of the Smyrna message is tribulation. That's how I would understand it, right? Not to say that there are 10 literal days or 10 literal years. He's saying that the main element of your experience, you people who are in Smyrna, the main element of your experience is going to be tribulation. Just like he would say to Laodicea, the main element of your experience is going to be compromise and lukewarmness. Every message has a focus. In Ephesus, he said the main element of your experience is that you are desirable. And I guess you could say, but you left your first love. There's a focus. And so the 10 days, I believe, is saying the focus of this message, the 10 of this message is tribulation. All right? Right, Sister Tracy? Having trouble finding her unmute button, or her internet giving her a problem?
Hearing me now, David?
Hearing you now. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, it's the internet as usual. All right. I have a question in my mind about that 10 days.
Yes.
You said everybody in this fellowship should understand what 7 means. So if it was 7 days, let me see if I understand. 7 to me would mean perfection. Am I right? Good.
Or completeness, yes.
Why not 10? Because I've always been hearing that 7, 10, and 12 are God's numbers. 12 tribes of Israel, and we have 10 coming up too, and we have 7 all the time. So why couldn't 10 fit for completeness? This church is going to get not the a form of tribulation, but the real McCoy, as they would put it, complete, full, nothing lacking. Just a thought that I'm thinking.
Sure, and it's a good question because actually, as I was doing some research, the word actually came up. It was actually said that it represents completeness. But the reason I looked further is because I'm thinking, if God already uses 7 to represent completeness, why would he use a different number? So I was looking for something that is similar, but a little different. Because, for example, the number 12, it doesn't mean completeness in the same sense. It's a kingdom number. And yes, it's 12. 12 is the kingdom in its perfect state. So it is used in the context of completeness or perfection. But each of these numbers has a little nuanced difference. That's why God uses a different number. And sometimes picking up that little nuance helps us to understand better what is being said. That's why I would say I'm not opposed to the idea that it means completeness, but to say that it is the complete focus of the message, then, if we put it that way, both ideas could be harmonized. So from looking at it in one or two other places, I'm tempted to believe it means that, the way I explain it is how I understand it up to this point. It means that this is the main focus of the message. It's the 10 of the message, if I could put it that way.
Okay, I get where you're coming from. Thank you.
You're welcome. I think Brother Tony's hand was up. He took it down. Go ahead, Brother Tony.
No, I was just gonna say I was looking that up and it was saying that it may mean like a limited ordained period of intense persecution.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Brother Tony. Yeah, Brother Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm kind of inclined to think that Tracy's idea or research was correct, because when you look at the world's numerical system runs by a metric, and everything's in groups of 10 to indicate complete groups, completeness in numbers. So maybe the 10 has a significance. Everything the world does, everything Satan does, and implements in his systems have to do with the Bible and God's ways, just twisted a little bit. But so that was my thought.
Okay, thanks, Brother Matt. Maybe that is what it really means. Maybe it's completeness in a negative sense. 7 is completeness in a positive sense, like it's God's statement of perfection. If it has to do with the world or something negative, then it may be 10. Maybe that's another way we could understand it. But I want to hope and have an expectation that as we go back through the book of Revelation, some of that might become more clear. The 10 kings at the end, is it literal 10? Is it a symbolic, whatever? So we could look at all of that. All right. So thank you, Brother Matt. Okay. So I have my thought there, the central element, which is tribulation. Maybe it's completeness, as was suggested. And then Jesus says, be thou faithful unto death. And of course, oh, I'm sorry. I'm not showing my screen. Apologies. Okay, so Jesus says, be thou faithful unto death, and I will give you a crown of life. So again, you can see here that there is this more than a hint. It's almost a statement of fact that they are going to die. But he's asking them to be faithful. Stand true, even though you're going to be killed. And this mention of death comes up into the Smyrna church more than to any other. And so I'm willing to go out on a limb and say that Smyrna represents a church of martyrs, martyrdom, a lot of martyrdom in Smyrna. And then he promises that if they overcome, he'll give them a crown of life. So, death as opposed to life. So, I tell you something. Christianity really is a religion where faith is everything. Because a lot of the things, look at what Jesus is promising them. Something in the future. He's saying, suffer now, die now. Man, you have to have faith. You have to have faith. I know that Western, modern day Christians, if you hear that the police come to lock you up, it's disaster. If you hear that the police, if you hear that they are looking for you for something, there's alarm. It's like the experience of Christians who live under the Smyrna condition is a mirage. It's nothing that we can relate to or empathize with. For these people, what does Jesus have to give them? Only a promise of the future. Be faithful unto death. I will give you a crown of life. Those people have to have faith. You have to have faith. And in a way, I'm longing for the day when the same circumstances come upon us in the West. because I think we're going to see a different breed of Christianity when we face that kind of situation. I mean, maybe I will live to regret my wish, but I really want to see with my own eyes Bible Christianity in my lifetime, you know. Jesus' promise for them is a crown of life. And that crown of life is a counter to death. As I was pointing out earlier on, Jesus does not deal with death by stopping you from dying. Praise the Lord. Jesus deals with death by restoring you from death. He says that those who overcome will not be hurt of the second death. You see him talking about death again? This time the second death, because he's trying to make them understand, look here, you're suffering, you're dying, everything appears disastrous. But look here, because of what you have gone through, you're enduring this. This is not the second death. This is the first death. He's asking them for faith. He's asking them to hold on to the promises that are in his word. There's no need to be afraid of the first death. Now, one thing I realized that I would just highlight as well is that for me, for you guys, for us living here in the West, you know what is our problem? Tomorrow morning we're going to pay more for gas, right? Oh, disastrous, right? And you're going to pay more when you go to the supermarket. For people living under those conditions, you know what is their concern? I might wake up tomorrow morning, or I might not wake up tomorrow morning. Everything takes on a different atmosphere. So you might pray and say, Lord, please don't let me have to pay more at the gas pump. They're praying, Lord, help me to be faithful unto death. And when they face death, all that is before them is a hope of life. When we face our crisis, let me continue using a little more at the gas pump. All that is before us is that we need to budget a little more carefully. It's two different worlds. It's two different situations. And so maybe Jesus' promise to these Smyrnans, I will give you a crown of life. Maybe for us, it seems like such a distant dream, way off in the future. How can you hold on now for something that will only come in the future? What are you giving me today? But the point I'm making is that your circumstances change how you look at things. If you live in a situation where your family, your neighbors are in imminent fear of death, why would you remain a Christian? It's because you have set your hope on the future. You know they are dying. You see them dying. You realize that God's plan is not to stop you from dying. What are you looking for then? Why are you still a Christian? Because you have fixed your hope on the future. And so Jesus is reminding you, be faithful unto death. I will give you a crown of life. You live in hope of what he will do in the future. For us, it's not as real because we are not facing the same kind of situation. Our needs and our prayers center around the little that we go through. It's two different worlds, two different brands of Christianity. But the wonderful thing is that the Lord has a way of taking us all, some through the water, some through the flood, some through the fire, but all through the blood. He has a way of making sure that we all get exactly what we need. Sister Esther, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to correct what I said earlier because I realized that we subscribe to the Epic Times, and it comes out of the people are in this country, but they're Chinese that put it together, and so I hear about the Falun Gong all the time, and I guess I just assumed they were Christians, but they're not. They have a Buddhist background.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Sister Esther. Yeah, thanks for the correction. All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of the Smyrna message. And we will stop here until next week. The final word of Jesus to Smyrna is that he who overcomes will not be hurt of the second death. And that's, of course, that is the encouragement for Christians in that situation to set your hope on the future. Remember what it says in Revelation 12? It says they, they, they overcame him. They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb, by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death. So that is one of the ways that we actually overcome Satan. But I think that those people in those situations, those people in Smyrna, are not waiting on the future to experience what that means. They are going through it right now.